The Prepare podcast is a product of the Maryland Center for School Safety and is intended to educate school safety partners in Maryland and beyond. Information shared will discuss current solutions, best practices, and lessons learned through interviews with individuals whose lives have been impacted by school violence, subject matter safety experts, and organizations providing strategies, resources, and support in the school safety space. We invite listeners to share the information with others, thus expanding the school safety community to include everyone in actions that keep Maryland students and schools safe. This topic series will provide information related to the important role students have in school safety. Episodes in the series will include information about ways to involve students from student leaders, a local school administrator, and a local university professor. They will all share their personal experiences and successful practices that others can utilize to engage students in a strategic way. We hope you find this topic series helpful in understanding the critical role students play in making and keeping schools safe. In this first episode of the Student Voice topic series, we hear from a local university professor who has conducted research and developed a program to assist others in empowering students to be active community members. Welcome, Dr. Nibbs. Thank you for joining us at the Prepare 2025 conference.
Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. I understand you just finished your session.
Yes.
So let's actually start for the listening audience, those that maybe weren't able to either attend your session because they were at a different breakout or were able to be here. If you could just introduce yourself and the organization you represent, just a little bit about the work you do.
Absolutely. So I am Dr. Nibbs. I am actually an assistant professor and disaster scientist in the Emergency Disasters and Health Systems Department at the University of Maryland, Baltimore County. And so it was really and truly an honor and pleasure for me to be here today, learning, but also being given an opportunity to present on some of the stuff that we're doing with regards to school preparedness. So
Great. So share a little bit maybe of the highlights from your presentation. What was it that you taught?
absolutely. So I presented the R.E.A.D.Y framework and its student-centered approach to school preparedness. So the traditional approach is to have preparedness and safety done to students and not with them. And the emerging research and science is showing that students need to be active stakeholders in their own safety. And so through the work that I've done with the student chapters of the IAEM, this R.E.A.D.Y framework that I presented today was sort of like birthed from that. And so R.E.A.D.Y basically stands for recruit, evaluate, act, design, and yield. And these are different phases of the framework where we try to recruit students and get them empowered to act as active agents in ensuring and fostering a school culture of safety and preparedness. The research is showing that drills are not as effective as we want them to be because students understand and perceive drills differently. And this comes from various different type points, right? We could look at cognitive function. Their prefrontal cortex is not properly developed. It actually develops until the age of 25, right? And so the way they process information is different than adults. And what happens during drills is that we perceive students themselves to be adults, not understanding that how we're communicating that information to them and how they're interpreting that information is different. And so that's impacting the effectiveness of current drills using the traditional approach. And then obviously there's the emotional aspect and so on, right? Students may not be able to understand the why behind drills, the why behind some of the safety procedures that's being done, and to regulate their emotions. So research is showing that when we get students on board, right, we make them stakeholders, we give them agency, it reduces not just anxiety, it gives them ownership in the whole process, and that creates sustainability when it comes to a culture of school safety. So
it makes what I presented. Perfect sense. Yes. I am a huge advocate for student voice, and they, I find this generation of students are very good at identifying problems and actually being able to propose solutions to those problems.
It's fascinating. I think a lot of people A lot of administrators may hear this and think, oh my God, it's just like another thing, right? But you're already doing the work. What we're asking you to do is just sort of shift how you perceive the work that you're doing and create a little bit of space so that we can include students because they often pick up on things that adults tend to miss. They are actually at the very front lines of the sort of like the prevent I sort of call them the preventative agents because they are there with other students. They can actually identify concerns way before the teacher may pick it up, way before an administrator may pick it up. So their involvement is very, very important.
So you've talked about some of the research. So in developing this model or this tool, do you have some stories of actually working with students that putting it into place or like what that looks like?
Absolutely. So one of the things that we're starting on the UMBC campus is an IAEM student chapter. And so we're in the planning phases of that, and we've gotten some students involved, and we did a safety audit, just a basic safety audit, asking students, do you know any of the school safety measures that are part of UMBC? Do you know if an event should happen, where you should go for safety, what resources are available on campus, and so on? And it was shocking to find out that many students not only do not know, but also they don't perceive some of the things that we consider to be important safety measures as important to them. And so this is sort of like giving us the opportunity to implement the various phases of R.E.A.D.Y on the UMBC campus. But my interest in school safety, school preparedness actually started at the University of Delaware, where I was a student, a member of the IEM student chapter, and then it just sort of like went from there. I've carried out various phases of the R.E.A.D.Y framework in my work with different schools, from working with schools in the summer program when I was at SUNY ESF, to some of the work that I've done in Baltimore schools as well. From that, we're basically seeing sort of like a gap, right, between what safety or SRO officers or administrators perceive as being important and what students perceive as being important. And when the two come together, it's actually quite amazing. I sometimes say to principals or administrators, just carry out a simple, for example, a hotspot mapping exercise, or just have a conversation with students and ask them, we have this measure in place and we're trying to prevent and mitigate bullying, for example, or we're trying to improve preparedness and so on. What is your perspective? And it's often quite shocking, some of the things that the students bring to people's attention, right? Because we miss some of the subtle little things. Yeah.
So a hotspot map. I love hotspot mapping. Can you
Yes.
explain for the audience what that actually is and what that would look like?
A hotspot mapping is basically, we ask students to go around the school and identify areas of the school where they feel unsafe. It could be from bullying, it could be just the exit is too dark, or this corner, students perhaps gather here and bully students, or a lot of students have this happen in this location and so on. And oftentimes what we find is different from what the administrators have mapped out. And so when you compare the two, you're sort of able to fill in that gap, right? Because you have the feedback from the students, and then you have the feedback from the police officers, from the school administrators. And when you marry the two, you're able to cover a wider range, right? You're able to actually see what's there. Whereas if you just take a top-down approach, you tend to miss the student perspective and some of the concerns that they may have. So
Yep. And so applying that, I'll just sort of add a little bit as a former administrator, at the middle and high school in particular, that when I create a duty schedule at the beginning of the year where I'm putting adults, sometimes I'm using it based on honestly old data.
yes,
Right? The hotspots last year were here and here.
exactly.
But being able to then adjust over the course of the school year, because hotspots will change.
Yes.
Right? As students now know that staff member is going to be in that
Exactly.
stairwell, it will move elsewhere.
I sort of think of it almost like flood waters, right? Water usually takes the path of least resistance. So think of it, it's almost like an organism that shapes itself as the school year progresses. But it's interesting to see how it shifts and flows. As, for example, schools take measures and students adapt to those measures and so on. So it's something that has to be cyclical. It has to be ongoing.
Right. So even that student voice then, not doing it just once a year.
It has to be ongoing. You have, whether you form like a peer-to-peer school safety ambassadors, whether you form clubs, whether you make it part of student government, students have to be stakeholders. It has to be an ongoing process, but you also have to create space for mentorship so you can transition new student leaders as the old ones graduate and move up the chain and the education ladder, right? So it's not something that can be static. It has to be dynamic. It has to be ongoing.
Yeah, it also makes me think when you're talking about students moving on, but the turnover of staff,
Yes.
right? Like, a particular building leader may have heard you today, right? Goes back to implement, and then in 2 years, if they're not there anymore,
Exactly.
how those things can continue, like how you make it part of the fabric of
You
school.
need to be able to design sustainable systems so that there's continuity to narrow those gaps. But yeah.
Thank you. So if there was one takeaway from your session that you want people to take back to school to implement, what would that be? That would really make a difference for them this school year.
I'd like to begin by saying, don't see safety as just another checklist. See safety as being you cultivating a school culture. And the reason why we see safety or preparedness as a school culture is because it takes on a whole community approach, right? It doesn't just put the burden on the administrators or on the educators itself, but on all stakeholders that support the school. So that would be parents, right? That would be the community itself. And we need to be able to see what the linkages are. Who are the stakeholders that support our school, not just financially? It could be a church group that comes to the school and has conversation with students. It could be a school band. It could be a band or a gym or some sort of club or organization in the community. Looking at all of the different stakeholders that can support school safety, that is also important. The second thing would be including students is not a novelty, it's essential to improve school safety. And third, including students as part of the co-creation of a culture of school safety, it doesn't have to involve a lot of resources. It doesn't have to be anything complicated, right? It could be simply starting by identifying which students may be interested in taking part in this new club that you might form at school. Or if there may already be some sort of like a club that you could pivot towards preparedness or a culture of safety, and then creating roles for students and giving them the agency to be able to take it forward. So start where you can with the resources that you do have, but do figure out a way to include students in the process. It doesn't have to be complicated, and there's simple measures that can be taken.
Great. Thank you so much. We hope you found this first episode in the Student Voice Topic Series informative. We encourage listeners to engage directly with Dr. Nibbs and gain access to her materials. The next episode in this topic series will feature a Maryland student who has been active in elevating student voice across the state and nationally for the past several years. We hope you continue to listen, learn, and reflect.
Promote resilience and preparedness in your school community. The R.E.A.D.Y framework empowers students and educators with a practical 5-step roadmap for building strong partnerships in emergency preparedness. Take action today by exploring the R.E.A.D.Y framework, access the toolkit, and join a network of future-ready schools. For more information, reach out to Dr. Farah Nibbs at nibbs.farah@umbc.edu.